everybody, welcome to Always Bored, Never Boring. This is the second video in a new series which I'm calling Stick to the Script, where I give an in-depth review working from a script. I hope you enjoy it. If you do, please consider liking and subscribing at the end of the video. When I first started reviewing board games, I spent a lot of time writing about the really old stuff, the kind of games you might find in your attic tucked between that box of He-Man figures and your old Transformers comics, the ones with brown tape on the box corners and a dished lid. My primary aim back then was to blow the cobwebs off of old classics to give them a bit of attention. And that's why I wanted to review Dungeon, a family-friendly Dungeons & Dragons themed board game for 1 to 8 players. And I'm going to get this out of the way up front. Dungeon is a bad game. Really, it's bad. Only, it's not bad. It's not bad at all. It's actually a little work of genius. It is a game that I always had fond memories of, and when I finally got to play it so many years later, it lived up to those memories. But it is bad. I mean, seriously, it has an exclamation point in the title. How many good games have an exclamation point in the title? And yeah, feel free to leave your best answers in the comments. I'd wanted a copy of Dungeon for a long time, mainly because I used to play the revised edition New Dungeon as a child and I wanted to relive those adventures. I would regularly check the charity shops and I always had my eye on lots on eBay, but I never found a copy and I never won any of my bids. But then in 2012, Wizards of the Coast released a new edition, and it is a beautiful edition. Purchasing this new version really was a no-brainer. In the UK it was available for about £10, and that's less than I've paid for some card games, and certainly less than I would have paid for an old copy on eBay. Better still, Wizards hadn't messed with the original rules. They brought the game up to date with gorgeous new art, but they remained faithful to the design. Unfortunately, a few years after this release, Wizards of the Coast updated the game with different art again. Art which, for me, feels like a significant downgrade. And now, as I record this review, the game seems to be harder to find and much more expensive. Amazon are listing it for over £30, which for this game is stupid money. But if you can get the game for around £10, you really do get a lot for your money. A nice mounted board representing the dungeon, teeny tiny cards for monsters and treasure, tokens, dice and cardboard stand-ups for the heroes. Everything looks wonderful, and when it's set up it really doesn't look like a game that costs less than the price of a cinema ticket. But a low price point and good artwork isn't really reason enough to buy a game, so what else does Dungeon offer? In simple terms, this is a distillation of every dungeon crawling experience you've ever had. It gives you a hero, dice, a dungeon filled with monsters, and treasure. The game really couldn't be any simpler. You have a hero, and you go into the dungeon in search of treasure. In every room of the dungeon you flip a card to find a monster, and then you kill that monster and loot its corpse. It's grim, for sure, but really this is exactly what you are doing in any game of this sort. Killing monsters, taking their stuff. Dungeon strips down the dungeon crawling experience to the bare bones. And often the monsters will strip your heroes down to the bare bones, but we'll get to that in a moment. There are 4 heroes to choose from, the classic archetypes of halfling, rogue, dwarf, cleric, human fighter and elf wizard, but there isn't really that much to tell them apart besides how much money you need to acquire to win with them. Rogues have a better chance of opening secret doors and need 10,000 gold to win. Clerics can handle themselves in a fight and only need 10,000 gold to win. Fighters are the strongest in combat, but they need 20,000 gold to win. And finally, wizards have access to a deck of spell cards, making them formidable warriors, but they must acquire a whopping 30,000 gold to win, meaning they are going to need to face the toughest enemies in the dungeon. Furthermore, while there are a few magic items to help you along the way, such as swords that confer a bonus in combat, most of the treasure you find will just count towards the total treasure you need to be classed the winner, and doesn't actually help you. A large amount of the game comes down to dice rolling. When you enter a room, you flip a card. Most of the time this card will show a monster. You then roll 2 dice in an attempt to kill the monster. The value you need to roll depends on the monster and the hero you are using. For example, the fighter may need to roll a 7 to kill an ogre, while a rogue needs to roll a 10. If you win the fight, you take a treasure card. It might be a new weapon, but normally it's a jewel or a sack of coins that gets added to your victory total. Of course, if you fail to kill the monster, it attacks you, and depending on how the dice roll, you may lose a treasure, miss a turn, be pushed out of the room, or outright killed. Just killed. Instantly. It's brutal. and kind of brilliant. It's brilliant because every roll of the dice matters. You are always engaged. Every roll of the dice is loaded with tension. There is no such thing as a sure thing. You might have a magic sword and you might be fighting the weakest monster in the dungeon, but with bad dice rolls you are still going to die, forcing you to start over from scratch. But if you don't fight, you won't ever get any treasure. If you don't put your neck on the line, you won't win. You are constantly forced to face horrible hungry beasties for the sake of a few coins, and you will fail. A lot. And there's not really anything you can do about it. And that's why the game is bad. You have such a small amount of control over what you can do. Yes, there are a few simple strategies. For example, the stronger characters can hoover up all the treasure in the low scoring rooms in order to force weaker characters to face stronger monsters, so they die more often. And you can follow characters around hoping they will die and drop items for you to collect. But generally, the best strategy is to hit as many rooms as possible as soon as possible. This is a race. This is not a deep, tactical game. This is a family-friendly kids game. This is a game where you play the odds by rolling the dice as often as possible and keeping your fingers crossed while you hope the monsters don't break them. And that's why the game is brilliant. It's so simple, anyone can play it. I proved this one Christmas when I set the game up for my parents who were both retired. There is no way I could play something like Descent with them, and there's no way they'd sit through a quick game of Blackstone Fortress, but they had no problem with Dungeon. They even had fun. They were laughing when people failed dice rolls and lost their treasure, and they were groaning when they flipped over a monster card to find a dragon. They laughed, I laughed. We were all laughing, making fun of each other, and just enjoying being together around a table. And that's what happens when you play good games, even when they're bad.